Hello, America. I want you to understand how we are the volume of the species too, and I want us to understand we need how we are grouped and how we are individuals as the system that since semi-ancient times the names of our countries have been tactical ulterior from. They have been individual uses, voicings as individual, simultaneously as group differences, and for them, every woman knows that the body of the Republic's voices, male or female, they're speaking for them without care for exceptions and exception nature, how it properly works, and without care for how fake exceptions and exception nature are used by the logic that replaces the Constitution unabridged communication with political communications, where and how it has been assigned not just by our founders who had to counter extort the other founders. And why? But it had been assigned by the breaching method that had entertained natures of laws individually grouped in together themselves that couldn't be entertained simultaneously as they were forced to be. And not, sense anyone who's going to use short words and truths not used for lies, not used to screen lies. The breaching method is a scientific value as answers, as a part with answers individually grouped in together that nature provides. Nature's identity as volume, its identity of relationship to itself, and the value of that are only increasing as the phenomenon of where and of how three identities of zero are only increasing value. Where and how English was revealed as a grouped language, where and how before, since before England can remember, because the identities, the names of semi-ancient countries were forced, hurt, tricked, persuaded, and taken as shock and awe. Use that phrase I heard through MSNBC, CNN, or Fox News. Also, the word extremism is measured and maintained by a breaching method, being and having been used. And with criminal foreign influence, qualities of fact, human nature, aspects, and nature itself as criminal insidiousness nature. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a licensed journalist. This is not to report news. This is to correct news. News has also, note that word, corrections involved with prisons. On and off the state of Connecticut corrections offices. Many people associated with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, is the former standing chairperson on the Racketeering Influenced and Corrupt Organization Act. He's also recorded having been before the World Trade Center attack, roles with names who have been with all roles also. I was saying roles too because there's foreign names involved and families here, there, entrenched in the difference of that also being exploited. Note how math uses difference smaller. I mean, this is more finite than math. And it is greater than math's infinity. The identity of forever nature that is becoming more volume through temporary. And this is where volume equals value as nature / nature as value. And the opposite sequence nature. slash simultaneous nature and its complete identity, which we are inside of, which honest science has a means to observe. It is two other identities of simultaneous nature, sequence slash simultaneous nature, and it is simultaneous slash sequence nature, where and how nature demonstrates us what things, how things were named and why, and how and why it would be motivated for reasons other than apparent, juxtaposed with apparent reasons, to pretend not to realize the significance of the history of our languages having been and being a significance that some ways had more sophistication than we have now. In some ways, we have more sophistication now because the identity of the hyper simultaneous nature reveals not only is our species body individuals grouped differences like ages, areas, sexes, and the species body volume slash S, and again simultaneously individual slash S, the other sequence nature. And this is and the value of truth before the order of the finite now, for example. There was a breaching method that was employed. It used effectively through our own. It measured and maintained, self-valued, roles with making torture legal and using defenses of that, pretended as a breaching screen, as breaching tools, maintenance uses, and weapons uses, but through our own. So now our own measure and maintain ourselves, still, never stopped. Real science never spoke for culture and its roles with the torture slash slavery method that the suburbs were designed for. Native Americans against Native Americans, colonists against colonists, including where and how defending unities, defending counters to that. No one was watching where and how there's possession slash hyper possession. I'm not going to keep repeating. The other is observable simultaneously. Its identity of relationship to itself is an identity of volume, as the value of why and how. The ancients would teach about how there are three hyper invisible, but only increasing identities of zero that are relative to these three identities of zero that we know are manifest. Zero, the zero that is between the positive numbers and the negative numbers. And the zero that is after 100. And then when it goes up to 1,000, 3 zeros, we put the first comma in. It is more probable. Nature reveals that nature itself reveals that it is more probable that the comma was referred to as the shadow of possession by the ancients of pantheism, of science that was conscious, that the ism part of itself is reliant upon prayer as a science method to answer questions. We have black pupils, slash whites of eyes. This is additionally to that. There are proofs that there is cipher slash decipher, but proves things that are true always. They have been replaced at each age of correlation nature with opinions, convictions, and theories defended with passions and or with calm natures, where and how was the breaching method employed criminal insidiousness natures of positive treatments, not just negative treatments and identity treatments. The breaching method tactically denatured the suburbs while it was to cause negative value nature progressions, acts, and natures, knowing that nature would demonstrate that. Nature would demonstrate those roles with those crazy laws would hurt everyone, and that would make them hurt each other, and there would be effects. See, no one was paying attention to how that was and is being used. Fake motivations with social and all syntax, all apparent motivations. This employed syntax regarding people's, so they want to speak, when you speak about positive or negative or identity, those three are bound. The Trinity is more than square and round. Vaccines. It is what keeps a piece of the identity of each musical note, of each shape, the other shape. And where that can't be, that group difference couples with the hyper-simultaneous only increasing identity volume slash S, because we could discern its individual volume by using how it is constantly tied to the five identities of simultaneous nature, sequence being one of them. The value of sequence true regarding this, understanding the significance of that and how a breaching method was applied to the laws and to syntactical defenses of them. Therefore, simultaneously to defenses of qualities of premises treatments, of fact, treatment nature, qualities, aspects, nature, excuses, also blaming other things, others, ourselves, as the breaching method people knew they would do when nature would take possession, because nature will not relent possession of our fact treatment nature with its system, even if we ignore its system. And this is where and how distinctly, non-distinctly, and simultaneously from our physical system and from our identity. Those are three volume sciences that are bound the same way individual grouped and species volumes are bound. And we know that the other species are individual grouped and together. They have the female male relationship to itself, not just to kids, no, remember, to variable things, but to a constant, which is where and how the identity of the hypersimultaneous is demonstrated by nature as needing to be discerned as a scientific value. Pantheism as a hyperpantheism as a science. Pantheism is all we could address and grapple with as a group. Groups can't defend the finite. And so the political parties force their candidates to entertain the logic and the nature of locations, areas, and states who had since they were kids, since before our founders were born, where the sciences are manifest at all locations, tied to databases for the same method, sustained Well, to exploit what's in that what no one was paying attention to. And for example, if anyone's going to explain this for nature, demonstrating it, that person is sensed by people who already use political logic. The news has been fabricating evidences, and they've been getting away with it because they have people that they had since before our founders were born. The North and South, sickly distinctly, through other countries themselves already fact-keeping nature slaves, as in individual voices. They were no longer allowed to value how we are individual grouped and together per where revelations and the lessons of nature are taught through this. Nature, hypernature. It can't be mimicked. It is only self that is itself, that is the identity of each identity of volume has a distinct identity relationship to itself. And each self that we could discern is is a hyper addition of what wants and needs more of all parts of itself, concentrated, cared about as itself, individually grouped and together. See, this breaching method employed our natural differences to pretend to communicate other than they do, to measure and maintain roles with that, with uses of that. Uses, plural, of that. The breaching method used through our own. So the breaching method would measure and maintain. Also had what is actually recorded and confessed. Remote possessions of the integrity of the logic of the colonies grouped too, even though they fought with each other. Those differences were self-valued by the natures and of logic, of identities, therefore names, while denying what nature was showing because they're still collusions with themselves in place of humanity knows at the other side of weapons and wars and of all the technology. There has not been equal competition, means to it. Relative also to where and how the overt, see, criminal enterprises and private ones, uncharged originally and still, because we're to become our founders had to force the other founders to pretend they wanted to become a hyper-archetypal criminal enterprise, like the other country could debate if it was going to be called that. It's going to show, if you debate that, your logic inherently, actively, progressively. It's going to have demonstrations of the same thing. You're going to value the sequence shifts, the denial of the value of that which is hyper-evidential. So that there is not, these are distinct identities of simultaneous nature. Being an individual, being the group differences, those are, and the species volume. That's a constant difference being demonstrated to us by nature, with other details being wiped away, going away. Least of IDs is more probably having been discerned by this ancient science / hyperscience, hyperpantheism. Pantheism dealing with what we can deal with as a group. So we have to bring back hyperpantheism. Means from nowhere. Our countries, A through Z. This is a science. This shows that stewards of the religions, they left out the first part of the Quran, the first part of the Old Testament. It says this is the most important part. All that's important is right at the beginning of the Quran. All that's important is right at the beginning of the Old Testament. Instead, people want to use passions and emotions and to interpret everything out of sequence. Oh, but this part, this is what this said. Oh, they pretend passions and emotions with the name Jesus. But then if you tell someone to follow mandated law, there's only three branches of government. They switch names. They're a certain type of victim slash hyper victim, where and how they miss the significance of having fact, keeping nature, predicate acts roles with the, with even with entertained, blamed on other things, others ourselves, and self value. Uses of logic and of time treatments, names treatments, of databases, per that sick method that employed black slash white, other than the course of eyes. Peer! All peer. In other words, the means appear. So we know hyper evidentially, simultaneously, while people are pretending to be able to speak for integrity and or self-defense, the inherent way we love and care for our species body. From off campuses, I caught them doing a trick against everyone. And then if you're going to, in other words, they're attaching everyone to fake conversation, and people pretend passion and emotion when they're older too. Where and how used remotely are the identities of difference of the branch of government, exceptions tied to them, exception nature. You know, all this time, it's not honestly when veterans. No, but look at the veterans are in that rat trap designed worse than suburbs. The suburbs were designed relying upon food and value nature's criminal insidious nature of means to cause positive value nature progressions action nature. Not really nature positive unto itself. Criminal insidiousness is positive. Positive and negative have conjunction to identity simultaneously slash hyper simultaneously. And that's positive to itself everywhere existence slash space is. To an extent. And then to an extent further. We're in how Earth and our own a special difference is distinctly non-distinctly. And is hyper simultaneously itself making more of itself. But we now being forbid its hyper native system, which no even Native American rights are forbid, but they're shocking all the differences. They assigned to be blamed on other things, others ourselves. The fundamentals of the people stacking at veteran homes at New York City, sickly distinctly from cities across the world. In Russia and in America, the homes look almost exactly alike. Because since before anyone was born, including our founders, that design was forced for that certain type of victim slash hyper victim. And the difference of it, whether you're homeschooled or what school it came from. The word school, words like all words like education, mind, identity, emotions, passions. Passions and emotions are about the simultaneous slash hyper simultaneous. And or so we could discern that deny. That's one of the things that the breaching method, that's one of the things that the breaching method used and uses to measure and maintain the real causes of blame, negative value, nature, progressions, acts, and natures. Self-value blamed on other things, others, ourselves. While with logic and relativity to all instances treatments. See, this breaching method before computers, before our founders were born, it understood the significance of the science's identity of relationship to themselves, individually grouped and together. So the notes of music also grouped. They have part of themselves that can look like that which is that I mean that can be too. In other words, that which is hyper additionally as itself, but only part of itself. In other words, except for how that, in other words, that group difference, how it is about difference slash hyper difference is about how the hyper invisible, but still discernible, comes with proper discernment of the invisible, but still discernible, with language such as all parts of it, individually grouped and together. So the subject and the predicate, a distinct identity of relationship to itself, a verb has. That's why we refer to it not just as a verb, but also as a predicate. Being a gerund, it's a distinct identity of relationship to itself, more than a state. See, we are more than and more finite than being states, while we are locations, areas, states, while we are individuals, groups, species, volume, while we are individual parts of ourselves, group parts of ourselves, in that complete identity that the center, that everything else, the group, the individual parts have semi-nature relationship to. And that's while simultaneously slash hyper simultaneously, we have relativity slash hyper relativity to that identity that not only has our species bound this way, with difference being demonstrated to us this way. The birds. I'm not sure about insects, if about sexes with the insects. But I'll do some. I'll see if there are some YouTube videos I could dig up for you. But we know that nature demonstrates not just with our species. There's more to this: male, female, individual, grouped, and species volume, and other, attended with passions and emotions, as value, as systems, individually grouped together. So where and how, and while the breaching method was measuring and maintaining everyone abridged. Logic, syntax, names should be used with instances, nature, or they would sense that person. And there would this is a method that could use remotely from across the seas. People. This is a method that replaced nature's means to cause positive value nature progressions, acts, and natures. And it showed that to everyone. And it propagated them, blaming other things, others, ourselves, because they had to. Hurt, tricked, forced, persuaded, tortured. So we follow what the people involved with the Patriot Act was involved with people that have been planting evidences on all sides of cases, and with victims and with victim predators. I mean, with victims advocates and with their campuses. There's only three branches of government, and relative to how there's exception nature. With identities, each identity has another piece of it. You want to play a black or white game, you're playing a game with the black white pupils. Here, in other words, we want our sciences free. There are people with the name Dylan. People have been using the fact that there are police, they have the right to lie, as a summary of the law that is criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. I'll show you how they forced the child offender. They need to be referred to as victims or victim predators or hyper predators, so they can be referred to, or they call me a predator. And the dummies, they only allowed to be the most sophisticated or the overt criminal enterprises. They're not legitimately, by the way, roles with these fire departments and police forms, state police, FBI, their locations next to the news media. They're increasingly demonstrating, tied to their recorded confessions and they attached me with WFSB to fake conversations with their news people, involved all along Route 3 and on off the state judicial branch offices, leaking rolls with facts, predicate acts, with evidential crimes, also of arrays. They put arrays of fake police reports into databases. They attach, they play games through each age of fact-cheating nature. Then they lie about what they perceive, how they're going to judge it, the integrity of that. If we say that we care about the people from the past, they're trying, or if we say, or if we note things about people that aren't bad, everyone's bad. That's because they have locked only 3 branches of government tied to all kinds of people, exception nature. Oh, this person knows this person. All that is involved with that identity theft, fraud, slander method against every single person in our founders in our face. So how could it be so hard for anyone to fathom when someone's noting that being and having been exploited? They have been preventing writing interbranch since we are kids, since before our founders were kids, before they were born, before our founding parents were born. This sick slavery method of humanity and their names, individually grouped and together from some ancient times, effectively self-value, shock, and awe. It wouldn't be that stupid with nuclear bombs. They have so many outs. All they have to do is admit how we got in this tactically denatured suburbs before our founders were born. This reveals simultaneously, right through our schools, people have been pretending with passions and emotions to believe things like slavery were caused by prejudice, so they can pretend to believe. They don't realize roles with facts, predicate acts, sexual, medical, and tactical delusions with their fact-cheating nature. From off the campuses, this is recorded. They have the family members of the campuses, leaders, also sickly, distinctly abused, so they can abuse others. That's why we need to have things dealt with on paper properly. Also, forgiveness, because they use the methods of pretending that people are saying things for motives that are faked by themselves, including against presidents. See, the statutes are written and interpreted with our rights to lie about presidents, with our rights to lie about political candidates. But they've been using that with people associated with James Comey and with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin. Also with Hartford courts and New Britain Superior Court people and people associated with them and their families who recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed they were involved with criminally foreign influence, remote uses of investigators in their campuses, including military police, on and off Hartford courts, and on and off West Hartford locations, and on and off New Britain Superior Court, on and off other campuses, intercities. Through time, they've been planting evidences, identity theft, fraud, slanders, also with investigators, the perception of the interbranch. differentially not wanting to be, but increasingly better than perfectly exceptions were not made for them. Criminally foreign influence, factor, nature, quality aspects in nature, relative slash hyper relative also to nature, demonstrating the breaching method. And with that simultaneously being demonstrated them in the way, in defenses of their names, and the defenses of their logic and nature regarding what causes negative value, nature, progressions, actions. The breaching method effectively signed those things, blamed on other things, others ourselves. Even and the exceptions too, used worse differentially too, because of the roles of foreign influences, also themselves grouped, used remotely to keep effectively those passions and emotions regarding words like democracy, words like dictators. So they're keeping knave, pretending other identities of logic collusions, predicate acts, facts, illusions. The news also recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed their influence to pretend that it's personal when people say things about their names, and they're lying about their motivations, also consciously because of their roles with other countries. All legitimate roles where you state effectively to be used syntactically by people as by excuses, you know, self uses of people blaming other things, others ourselves, that are singularly used by the human fact human nature breaching method. That is one of the things always, constantly, apart with all causes of negative value nature progressions, acts, natures in our suburbs, let alone in our cities, let alone in New York City, where semi-apparent is that conjunction that can't help but be, where the only increasing value of where and how we are grouped also, species, body, of volume, everywhere the species body stands. It is hyper evidential that we have means to cause evolution, fruits, gifts, means of infrastructure to make more space for the people in the suburbs at the same time while making more room for people who don't even have houses. With and designed where the nature and everything, it's not going to cause negative. These designed to keep a bunch of fake pretending other or sensed. So they still, we have the women roles through administrations and lifetimes with abuses of the girls and boys as the roles with the counters to it and collusions, because there are juxtaposed natures of organized crime and uses of that. I'm not a lawyer, I'm not police force, I'm not criminal. The news has been planting that also they have roles with online manipulations of all communications platforms. They have the sense and sensibilities of the people at those locations hurt by this, but pretending other. It's not supposed to pretend you don't understand people. They say the three branches of government preventing writing, making things up into databases with child offenders. You're not supposed to let them not prevent writing because they've been lying about their motivations. Because these are people roles with the World Trade Center also, who have been roles connecting predicate acts with names between campuses, making fake instances, fake identities of relationships to itself, planting what they call evidences, where and how remote uses of, legitimate statistics interpreted and used for criminally foreign influence. Nature defenses also preemptively at the locations. And they're using wire crime methods with their phones too. WFSB also with Twitter has the FBI involved with sex offenders and digital crimes with women and police forms and family members and people at the corners of that near and in with the FBI involved with this too. They've been planting fake things on campuses, people that never even saw themselves on campuses. Because there's a possession of people that go back and speak about education, things like education, identity. Other things were blamed. Others or selves were blamed. Well, our founders communicated for us to bring the breaching method. So get Connecticut into branch onto paper, into one name and sequence, because these are also people with New York families through time, roles with uses of the campuses and the sciences remotely, but also parks, elections, locations, the locations next to every location, everyone's neighbor, so they could have people leave things out and or make things up. Certain type of victim / hyper victim they only allow to be. Also, while blaming other things, others, ourselves, or saying nothing. Fear. So the news has been planting roles with crime scenes. We have to understand fact, cheap nature, predicate acts associated with, and methods of them, and uses of that associated with people pretending passions, emotions against crimes, and with uses of their exceptions where they're legitimately right about that. That's also having been used remotely. All we have to do is keep the chorus of black people's whites of eyes pure, clear, and native pure, hyper native pure. See the dreams of the Navajo. This is a science because we are a science forbid. So long we have the communications of our founders replaced in our face and through ourselves or that person sensed. Yeah.